What's up, everybody? Welcome into a new edition of Celtics Beat. And there's been much to delve into since the last time we had a show. In fact, the last time that we chatted with Keith Smith only a week ago, it was, hooray, Gallinari's going to be okay. He's only going to miss a month or 2 months and don't sign anybody and it's no problem. And then everything went to hell about a day and a half later. Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti, Brian Barrett here with us. Go ahead, Ed.
Not a day and a half later. It was like an hour later.
It wasn't that fast. I know historically for us in this show, it's that quick.
I don't even think I had finished editing yet.
No, because then we would have really panicked and said we wanted to redo the show or something stupid like that. No, it was like we recorded Thursday and I think that came out Saturday or maybe Friday afternoon, but we had a full day clearance.
Hang on, I'm looking this up.
Check it. You go back. You look at the tweet history. This what you see, Brian. You may know this. You've been on this show before, but Evan and I we have a very unfortunate history of talking about whatever it is we talk about on this show, and then something goes to crap about an hour after we record. Before we even release the show publicly, we'll find out there was some other breaking news.
Yeah, that's brutal. And the Gallo thing's brutal too, man. I felt like everybody dodged a bullet. He was only going to miss a little bit of time. And I was convincing myself too, like, hey, maybe this is going to be good in the long run because he'll be more rested for the stretch run of the season. Of course, he's a little bit of an older player. I still don't understand.
I were DMing about, yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand this. So how did they not know originally? Like, was it too swollen to get the results? I still don't understand.
Was Dr. Nick from The Simpsons the one that was working on him over in Italy?
I'm more mad that it came out originally. Like I was, okay, we've dodged this. We're over this. We're going to be good. The Celtics going to have Gallinari back at some point this season. I'm more mad that it came out originally that he didn't tear his ACL than he actually tore his ACL because I got my hopes up.
Yeah. No, I mean, we knew that there was a problem with the meniscus out of the gate, but when you start to see the reports, granted from overseas, not from like Celtics team doctors or whatever, but reliable reports seemingly, the ACL is intact. Shams was putting it out there and everybody else. And it's like, all right, okay, you know what? Not the worst thing in the world. Some of the stuff that you just mentioned, we can talk ourselves into this being a good thing as we got into with Smith last week. Instead, yeah, upon further examination, the guy might miss the entire season. What? How does that happen?
I don't know what the hell's going on. These doctors got to get it together. I put it on the medical community as a group. It's on them. It's not on us. It's not on the newsbreakers. It's on them. I mean, they were given this information.
Listen, we are and I mean, I think blaming the newsbreakers that I'd be okay with that. Here's what I know, like you, Evan, me, we're not guilty of anything. We just reacted to the news that was out there.
Right. Yeah, we're blameless in this thing. It was less than 24 hours, Kaufman, by the way.
It was less than
24 hours after we recorded the show. It was a full-on, and we should have known it right then and there when we had recorded the show, and uploaded it, and then should have known right then and there was going to be a problem. Because
what a Friday news dump too, huh?
Well, it's the way this show goes. We can't. For some reason, we can't get ahead of the news cycle. Every single whatever news it is, we just can't get ahead of it. We can't the only thing that happened, truthfully, was the Brogdon trade happened like while you and Keith were recording.
Right.
And it was like one of those things where it's like finally for once, like when the news so folks, just to behind the camera here.
Yeah.
When news breaks, you want to be like one of the first guys after to have it because it's topical, you're in the news cycle and you can get in the wash, so to speak. When you have something about Gallo where you're like, yeah, he's coming back, and then 24 hours later, he's not coming back, your whole podcast is shot. And the only thing that we really talked about was like, who could fill Gallo's spot? And we joked about maybe bringing in Carmelo Anthony, which is no longer a joke. It's actually something they should seriously consider.
Well, here's where I think we did a decent job as we just continue to pat ourselves on the back. Where I think we did a decent job last week, and we'll build on that this week, is at least leaving the door open to, well, what if? Like hypothetically, Gallo's out longer term, like Keith was floating out. Let's say he doesn't come back till January, February. What do you want to do in that case? And then we started obviously getting to the Melo stuff. But yeah, now we know. We still don't know definitively how long Gallinari is going to be out. But, I think it's fair to say best case scenario, he returns toward the end of the regular season and maybe you could have him for the playoffs. I don't think anyone should be shocked if he misses the entire year because let's remember, typically an ACL tear, even with the advances in modern medicine and all of that, you're still typically looking at 9 to 12 months. So, I wouldn't expect Gallinari back anytime soon. And even when he does come back, for him to be anywhere near game shape, ready for a playoff run. But here's where I want to start. As three mildly successful people from Syracuse all gather together on a show to talk about a Syracuse legend, or at least a guy that carried them to a championship in his only year at Cuse, Carmelo Anthony. I want to begin with this question. And obviously, Brian, I'll start with you. Is Gallinari, or was Gallinari, an important signing for the Celtics? And it's kind of a loaded question. I am going somewhere with it. But was he an important signing? Is he an important loss for Boston?
Yeah, because he gives them respect from the outside, like as well as Grant Williams shot the ball last year. How many times was Grant wide open in the corner, right? Like eventually teams are going to guard him, but it never really happened. And we saw this in the postseason as well. Remember, who was it? Draymond Green famously said after that game, he was going through the sheet and he's like, well, Marcus Smart hit this many threes and Al Horford and Grant Williams and like whatever it was, the combination. But the point being is Gallinari comes in with the reputation as a flamethrower. So, for example, you go back to that series where I'm not blaming this on the other players, but all the turnovers from Jalen and Jayson Tatum. Well, now if Jayson Tatum is dribbling to his left and Gallinari's on the wing, you actually have a decision. If it was hypothetically Al Horford, you'll live with Al Horford taking that three, even though he shot the ball well. With Gallinari, it's a different type of player. And you go through the past 4 seasons, and I know he played with some really good point guards, but all the numbers with him on the court compared to off the court, the offense jumps through the roof with him on the court. So I believe it was because the two things they needed, additional playmaking, and you feel like they got that with Brogdon, but a flamethrower, and that's exactly what Gallinari was. So yes, I do think that it was a big signing for the Celtics, and now I think it's a huge loss.
And some size and all of that, some smaller lineups, some ability to, rest Horford and Rob as far as you could play Gallinari at the 5 and yada, yada, yada. There are some different reasons. I agree with everything that you just said. I agree that even if we're talking about the 9th, 10th most important player on the Celtics in terms of their rotation, a guy who wouldn't even necessarily be a big fixture in a playoff rotation, but would give you meaningful minutes or meaningful spots of rest, blows for more important players during the regular season, he had value. So where I'm going with this is now we're at a point, and I'll credit my buddy Landman for, a good friend of this show as well, for bringing this up. And I think he's absolutely right. If you are of the mind, and he's not, by the way, but if you are of the mind that Danilo Gallinari was an important addition and therefore an important loss for the Boston Celtics, it is now on ownership, not personnel, not Brad, not Zarin, and so on and so forth. It's on ownership to make it right. You got to spend. You have to replace that player. If he was an important player, you have to replace him. You have to get a player who can come in and give you more than Sam Hauser is going to give you, or more than, a Luke Cornett, or a larger role for Grant Williams, or, you need that outside guy who's a veteran, who can give you some size, some length, some minutes off the bench, can give you that instant offense. Basically, we're talking about Carmelo Anthony, or we're talking about, if you wanted to spend a little bit more into the tax, a difference between, let's say, after penalties, $16 million and $28 million, use the TPE. Get Rudy Gay. He's just out there dangling. It's on ownership now. They're this close. There's still the sportsbook favorites to win a championship. When you are this close and you suffer a loss like Gallinari, it is now on you to replace him. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'd throw out one other name because I like the Carmelo Anthony idea, and I do have a soft spot, as I'm sure both of you guys have a soft spot for Melo as well. But we know he can shoot. He shot really well last year on open threes. He was at 46%. The Celtics run 19th in open threes. But if you really want to get expensive with this thing, there is a fire sale going on in Utah. And it appears that you have a couple of guys there that are going to be on the market. Now, the problem is, and the guy that I'm going to get to is Bogdanovich. I always screw up the first names. Is he Bojan?
Bojan, yeah.
Okay, so he's Bojan Bogdanovich, who shoots the ball well, although his price, and it's only a 1-year contract, it's about $19.5 million, but we know he can shoot the three. He's not a great defender, but neither, of course, was Gallinari. That would be the type of player that you could say, okay, he can come off the bench every once in a while.
Well, but how are you even getting him?
Well, you'd have to give up something, and you'd have to make a deal with Danny.
You're not able to use a TPE to bring him in, so you got to
send out like Derek White, probably.
Yeah, you're gonna have to give up someone with a combination of fairly significant salary.
Yeah, or it's See, here's the other issue for the Celtics. Not that this is a big problem. It's good long term. They don't really have a bad contract, right? Because ideally what Ainge would want is picks, and you could attach a bad contract that they just take on for the season, right? And who on the Celtics is on a bad contract? Really nobody, right? Horford's on a good contract. Now, Marcus Smart's contract is phenomenal. Not that I want to trade him anyway. It wouldn't be worth it. But I mean, think about this. Smart would have been eligible for the Supermax if they didn't get him extended before last season. So, and it's a good problem to have, but they really don't have anything to send out. I'm just spitballing here in terms of a bigger player you could get than the Carmelo Anthony, which seems like in terms of the guys on the market, he is the best guy that is available.
Well, he's basically the same player, Ev. Like, I'm not saying like historically, like Carmelo, all-time Olympic scorer, and he's a Hall of Famer and all that. But like at this stage of their careers, he and Danilo Gallinari, they're basically the same guy.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, Melo's probably a slightly better rebounder, a little more physical, like down low. Gallo to me in his, later ages, like I don't think he's much of a banger anymore.
Yeah, I just mean they can shoot from the outside. They can give you some offense off the bench. They'll give you limited minutes. Neither's going to demand a start. They both want to win a championship. Neither's going to defend.
But Melo's going to give you a little bit. So they are a little bit different. Like Melo's going to give you a little bit more one-on-one play, which they might need. I don't know how much Melo has left in the tank, but, I think he's a much better and more capable off the dribble scorer, which they're going to need. It can't all just be Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and now they've added Brogdon, and they've, Smart can do it from time. Like it's always good to have guys that can break guys off the dribble, one-on-one. The why I was jacked about Gallinari, besides the obvious Italian thing, is that, he's a wide open, dead-eye 3-point shooter. And Melo, as he's gotten older and understood that like his role has changed, he's no longer like once he went to Portland and got kind of readjusted a little bit, and played on a team as more of a bench guy, but a bench guy that's in to just, get buckets. He's kind of changed a little bit. He can definitely shoot as a wide open 3-point shooter. He's, more towards the upper 30s, I think last year. I would welcome that. So I guess my question revolves more around, and this is something I don't have time to look up. So they can apply for the disabled player exception, which is half of what Gallo makes. And now Boston, if they want to offer Melo a contract before they apply for this exception, it would cost them $16 million, even though it only cost them $2 million for the vets minimum because of the $14 million in tax.
Right.
If you apply for the disabled player exception and you are granted that exception, does the contract you offer Melo, because they can offer him half of Gallo's is $3 million, that's the vet minimum, that'd be fine. Do you still have to pay that additional $14 million, or is it under normal circumstances? Is it not as expensive because you're getting an exception on a contract you've already had on there, but it won't be useful? That's my only. What is? I
thought going into sports broadcasting, I wasn't going to have to worry about this level of math.
Yeah, I thought so too, and this is why Keith sometimes is clutch, and I just coming down to ownership, one is the pain of the tax. Like I agree with that, Adam. If they don't take this seriously and grab a guy that's seriously going to help them, because again, as we all believe, we think Gallo is a guy that would make an impact on this team. From a money standpoint, I don't know if that changes anything. Like, is it that $16 million that we talked about, or is it back down to $2 million because of that exception? I don't know the answer to that. And
and I don't know. Matters. I don't know exactly how that translates. I guess I will say that any articles I've read to this point have sort of highlighted that those same luxury tax penalties for Carmelo Anthony, and nothing about the disabled player exception and all of that. So I don't know. Maybe we'll find something good out from either Bernardoni or Keith or whomever else, obviously, to your point. It's what I think is really interesting, though, Brian, and this is something that Keith, I think it was, brought it up last week, and then Forsberg has since written about it as well, is, we think about Carmelo and all right, well, a couple $1 million in the vet minimum, but then it's again the $14 million that Evan just mentioned, the luxury tax. So it's a $16 million contract for a guy that ordinarily you wouldn't want to pay $16 million to, but because Boston still doesn't have a 14th guy signed to the roster, which is a requirement, by the way. You don't need 15, but you do have to open with 14, whether it's a summer league guy or, one of these guys who came in with non-guaranteed contracts, whomever it is. You sign one of them or you sign Carmelo Anthony, and more or less it's the same money. It's basically the same money. So you may as well just sign the better player. It's just a function of whether Carmelo would want to come here in the first place, It's clearly his best opportunity to win a championship, short of, I guess, going back to the Lakers. But I still think this is a better opportunity. And, it's much better than going to the whoever, the Knicks or one of the other places that are rumored to sign him. You could wait a little bit if you're him, try and amp up more money, but I still don't see him getting better or much better in the veteran min. And there isn't going to be another guy that Boston could sign that could give them that surefire offense. Because if they believe, this is just my opinion, if they believed in Sam Hauser enough to want to develop him and really give him a role, Gallinari wouldn't have been here in the first place. In the same way that if they believed in Peyton Pritchard enough a year ago, Dennis Schroeder wouldn't have been here in the first place. So they clearly want to lengthen things out with vets, guys that could get them over the hump, guys that weren't there at the end of last year when they ran out of gas and they needed that offense. Sam Hauser, I hope he is, but he's probably not that guy. So you got to go out and sign somebody.
Yeah, a couple interesting things there. First thing with the Lakers, I don't know. Did you guys hear Perk say that they could have the best defensive backcourt in the league? Which is just, I mean, he's had a lot of bad takes. I mean, that one is right up there. I mean, with his
that's number one.
Listen, our guy Park is jumping the shark, man. We're gonna have to get him back on this show at some point soon to talk about some of this stuff.
I don't know what's going on with that guy, but
just make sure you carry the hell on while you're at it.
But no matter what it is in terms of the price, I do feel like I was wondering what the ownership group would do, because remember right at the beginning of the offseason, Brad came out and he said, we have the green light. And then he went out and he spent all that money in terms of free agency / trades, et cetera. So I do trust that the ownership group is going to be willing to pay. And here's the thing. They did it during the Big Three era, the latest Big Three era, of course, Garnett, Pierce, and Ray Allen. So you would think they were 2 wins away from a championship a year ago, that they would be willing to put the money out there, because they have basically told you that they're going to do it, and it looks like they're going to do it. So if they think that Carmelo Anthony is the piece that puts them over the top, or at least helps them in some capacity during the regular season, go ahead and do it, because it's not as if you're giving up something to bring him in. And you can, if you need to make an adjustment, get a role player at the trading deadline, that's still going to be available for you. So if you bring in Melo and he sucks, well, then you can figure something out when we get closer to the trading deadline to try to upgrade the rosters. You try to make another run down the stretch to get back to an NBA Finals, which obviously the road is going to be more difficult based on, you would assume, the health of some of these teams, mainly Milwaukee.
Yeah, I guess what just kind of scares me is that they might think that Carmelo's not that guy. And I know that I have not been, you talked about like Syracuse soft spot or whatever, for years of doing this show, and Evan can attest to this. I have been sort of at the front of the line of don't sign Carmelo Anthony, because the Carmelo Anthony that we were talking about then and the Carmelo Anthony we're talking about now are two totally different players. This one has bought into being a role player and a reserve, and he's 38, and he knows that basically the only thing missing from his Hall of Fame legacy is a championship. This isn't a guy that is, Nuggets Carmelo or Knicks Carmelo that, is it, or even still like a little bit living in denial Thunder Carmelo, who's trying to put a team on his back and do it himself. He knows that's not who he is anymore. And it's not what we saw with the Blazers. It's not what we saw with the Lakers. This is a guy that can come in and help you. And maybe I'm in Evan's mind, I'm putting them on too similar a straight line, but I just think that if you thought enough of Danilo Gallinari to bring him in on a 2-year deal for what his strengths and weaknesses are, and I was all about that signing, and I'm bummed as hell that he's out for the foreseeable future, I think the same about Carmelo Anthony, basically, so I just think that it's a really easy fix, and I don't know how they internally feel about that, obviously, and we haven't really gotten a whiff of that from anybody out there to this point. Like Washburn is one of the guys that's, really sort of spearheading the sign Carmelo and why haven't you done it yet? But everybody else has been kind of quiet on this front. I don't know how they view him. It seems like nothing is imminent, clearly, but it makes me a little nervous that they could lose Gallinari and then just look at Sam Hauser and say, he could probably do the same thing, because I just don't think he can.
I like your rationale on that of like, if you thought Gallo actually meant anything, like, because some people, Seth was one of the guys that was like, I don't think the Gallo thing was a big deal. And I obviously fought against that quite a bit. Then yeah, you have to take the injury seriously. You have to fill the spot seriously. And the problem is there's not a bunch of guys left over. at this point that could really help you. You know, when you first sign guys in free agency and you're looking around, like there's obviously a bunch more names, but we're getting closer to training camp and those guys just aren't that anymore. And Boston still has this thing about filling a backup big spot too that we talked about ad nauseum at this point in the summer because it's the only thing they haven't done. So now you have to weigh this particular part of it too. Do you try and get a big? You know, I feel like Cab's going to end up being the guy. You know, I know we've heard a lot about Luke Cornett and how they trust Luke Cornett. I think Cab and Galley could end up being the guy just because they might have to put a little bit more energy and a little bit more thought into the Carmelo Anthony thing or X player who's going to fill this spot thing. So to me, it makes the most sense considering your options. And again, I agree with Adam. You take this seriously, but Melo just kind of checks more boxes than anybody else. And like Rudy Gay, I guess, like, I don't know. I haven't been a big Rudy Gay fan in a while. He's a little bit younger. You know, they shoot relatively similar from 3-point range. Fills a similar void with guy that's, you know, past his prime and understands his role at this point.
Well, and you got to pay an additional 12 or 13 million for Rudy Gay.
Right.
Like if you want to, you know, quote unquote, cheap out for Carmelo, which is not cheaping out, you know, to credit ownership if they do it, you know, that like, dude, I'm fine with doing that before Gay. Brian, here's something we're however many minutes into the show that we haven't even mentioned, and retiring Herald legend Mark Murphy, and a good friend of the show, mentioned this. He tweeted this to me the other day. How about the fact that Jayson Tatum would be all about it? Tatum's out there liking posts about Carmelo joining Boston. You know, one of, you know, we always talk about the Tatum Kobe thing, and obviously that was a very real thing, but Carmelo was right there too. That's another guy that Tatum grew up emulating and wanting to be and idolizing and all of that. Like, let's kowtow to the superstar, folks. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And by the way, both Jordan Brand guys, and Tatum's about to get his new sneakers, so that's big as well. But I completely agree with that part of it. And I brought that up on my pod recently, is just, if you look at it, so Carmelo Anthony's really lived, 3 NBA lives. He's a star, and he, at the end of his stardom, he becomes the guy that can't win a championship, which from my perspective, it's like, what team was he supposed to win a championship with? With Iverson and the Nuggets? I mean, the Chauncey Billups team was really good, but you're dealing with Kobe and Pau Gasol at that particular point in time. So I didn't really understand the argument where he was supposed to win with who. Like, he never really had a great team around him. Now, some of that was probably his fault, like demanding to get traded to the Knicks earlier than he needed to, because he could have just signed there in the following offseason. But you go from that to not washed up, but not a superstar yet, and not willing to accept that role with, remember, first Oklahoma City, where he said, wait, me come off the bench? He didn't want to do that. And then he goes to Houston. It doesn't work out there either. And then he has to sit out, and he comes back with Portland. And those guys, Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, they like having him around. And he's sort of accepted where he is in his NBA life, if you will, unlike guys we've seen recently. Allen Iverson couldn't do it. Once he wasn't a superstar, he was done, right? I mean, he was done after that. And I would say it seems like a very similar scenario is playing itself out for Russell Westbrook. I mean, the guy can't accept where he is in his NBA life, if you will. And Carmelo, it seems like from that perspective, has already passed that. He's already passed himself. And to your point, Adam, these guys looked, I mean, Carmelo Anthony and LeBron, remember at the beginning of their careers, all those games are on national TV. Carmelo won a national championship. Carmelo is a massive star. And I do think the players would get a kick out of having him around, right? I mean, think about how long that season was. 7 games against Miami, 7 games against Milwaukee. You had to play major minutes down the stretch of the regular season because you had to catch up in the standings after the hole you put yourself in. Just having him around, I think it would help out. And I can't believe I'm saying this because obviously 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said this. But from a camaraderie standpoint, I think it'd be major for this team to have a guy like him around.
I got to tell you, you mentioned the like Carmelo and the Rockets, and I know he was only there for like 10 games or whatever it was, but whether it's if I'm even remembering these right, like Patrick Ewing being a Sonic or Hakeem Olajuwon being a Raptor, like I have such a blind, I don't even really remember Carmelo being a Rocket.
He's a wizard.
I have such a blind spot for that. Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. I like in a month, I will forget that ever happened. Like I won't even remember us discussing it.
The only reason I remember it, I was in Houston at the time. It's the only reason I remember it.
I barely remember the OKC stuff. I was rattling off in my head, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I think he had a cup of coffee with OKC at some point."
I think he was there for like a full season, like 80 games.
And Billy Donovan wouldn't bench him in the postseason.
Yeah.
So that was like Donovan Mitchell's rookie season. And Mitchell, they just kept getting Melo switched on to Mitchell, and Mitchell was just roasting him. And that's because Billy Donovan, young coach, this is legend Carmelo Anthony. He wouldn't put him on the bench.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I'm with you. I think it makes a lot of sense from a camaraderie
standpoint.
standpoint.
Can we make a negative? What's the negative? Because we're all pro Carmelo Anthony.
I'm not sure.
The negative is
all right. So listen, the negative is, and it's not our money, but from an ownership perspective, the negative is spending, an extra $14 million in luxury tax or whatever, because they're at a point where they're spending, it's like $4.50 for every dollar they spend. So that's why the penalty is so severe. So that another negative would be, let's say Danilo Gallinari comes back earlier than expected and he's good. Now you got these two guys. You're going to have to bench one of them. They're not both going to play. They're redundant. I don't care. I'm just saying, like if you're like Ime or Brad, you're putting that on the list probably. Another would be you're not even giving a chance to developing Sam Hauser. And you're committed to him for another 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is at this point. So you want to see, ideally, he's a young guy, has a reputation for also being a shooter who isn't much of a defender. You'd love to see if you can potentially harness something there. And obviously, if you're burying him behind yet another guy, that is a negative. In the same way that people like you and I have, bitched about, like, why isn't Peyton Pritchard getting an opportunity here? Well, it's going to be that same conversation with Sam Hauser all over again for a young guy that could then latch on somewhere else and be a good serviceable NBA role player. So that's, but I feel like we're kind of reaching. Like, I don't feel like there's any overwhelming negative to signing Carmelo Anthony. I really don't.
I would say that the two negative things, you alluded to one of them, obviously. I mean, it's a low-hanging fruit, but he is a traffic cone defensively. But you say, okay, he's not going to play major minutes in a postseason game. So
and he's never going to play crunch time in the regular season.
Right. I mean, exactly. But the other component is just, if you look at the players that the Celtics have and the two signings they made, obviously Gallo being one and Brogdon being the other, and you look at some of the guys on this roster right now, considering Melo is older, it's just the depth appears to be pretty good right now, obviously hurt by the Gallo situation. But a lot of these guys have an injury history, right? And that was sort of the thing with Gallo. We knew there was an injury history there, more specifically with Brogdon, right? That's why the cost, it appears like Brad stole him. But the reason it was there is because just go look at Brogdon's basketball reference page and look at the games played. That's the reason it didn't cost you much. Marcus Smart, we know, has had an injury history. Jaylen Brown, like, quietly has an injury history. He's always dealing with something. Horford is an older player who had an incredible season last year. Can he duplicate that? So I just look at it in right. So that would be my thing is this team.
Rob, obviously.
Rob, yeah, massive. And you'd like to keep him under 30 minutes a night. So that would be my one thing is just you're bringing in another older player with a team that isn't old, although it has some older players, and a lot of the main pieces of this team, there's major injury history there. So you could end up being thin really quickly if the Melo situation doesn't work out.
Yeah. Can we get to the money thing real quick? Because this is the one thing, I mean, Joe Lacob has basically been like, we don't really care. We'll just keep spending. And then he was mad that got out because he's like, oh, people will just keep spending with us. Because that's one of the things. They were like, oh, financially, we're just, we're way better than everybody else. So we'll just keep spending as much as we have to keep this team together, which is exactly what you should do. We all know the cap's going up dramatically with this new TV deal that's going to come down the pike. But they're also going to get more money because they're going to add 2 more teams to this NBA league. And I'm pretty sure when they purchase and put new teams somewhere, like, don't the owners get a piece of the dues so there's more money coming into the NBA very shortly. I mean, it's to me, like, the money thing to me is kind of a really, and look, it's not my money, so I guess it's hard for me to but it's a kind of a bad excuse considering it's the number 2 league in American sports by a long shot. I mean, I don't know if you guys.
Celtics are one of the most valuable franchises. Look
at. I don't know if anybody saw Yankee Stadium in Game 1 of the doubleheader the other day with Minnesota. Now I understand.
I saw you tweeting about it. There were like 6 people there.
They had 11 people behind the plate. 11. That would never happen in any NBA game. Never, ever, ever, ever. So like, the NBA is in a really good place. It's going up, 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 up. You're getting more revenue coming from TV deals. You're going to add to like. spend now, like do it now while you have, when you have a team that's worth spending for. And I think they determined that pretty early that they need to have a team. This team is worth spending for. They just got to the NBA Finals, and the two best guys in the team are 24 and 25.
Don't let last year become lightning in a bottle. Like don't let last year become this perfect storm, or at least mid-January on, this perfect storm of oh my God, like for the first time for like 2008, we're fully healthy for a deep playoff run, and it's ours for the taking, and they came up a little bit short. Don't let this next year, don't let a lack of going a little bit deeper into your pockets be the reason that you can't get there. Or hopefully, and this is beyond anyone's control, hopefully just a parade of injuries doesn't happen. Knock on wood, hopefully we're beyond the COVID totally derailing a team season. I'd like to believe that anyway. That was much more of a 2020 2021 thing. But last year, things from that midpoint on, or really from 50 games on, because the first, when they started 25 and 25, things could not have been better. They could not have broken more right, short of falling short those last few games in the NBA Finals. I would hate to see them enter this year as the odds-on betting favorites and then just see this steep regression because X, Y, and Z transpires.
Right. And like, you have questions looming over the franchise long term, right? And the Jaylen situation is just so fascinating to me. I'm sure you guys have talked about this, but
come up, yeah,
it's come up a little bit. His playoff run, and especially the finals, is so unique to me. Like, his shooting was ridiculous. Like, to see where he's come as a shooter is just unbelievable. I mean, he was a flamethrower. They're running plays just to get him coming off screen. It was unbelievable. At the same time, felt like he lost his mind and forgot how to dribble, which is obviously a concern going forward. But the bigger thing, of course, is the free agency looming in 2 years. So this season coming up, it's going to be major that this team makes a similar run, because then does Jaylen think like, maybe and now I don't believe Jaylen could be the number one option on a team that is consistently in the top 6 in the Western or the Eastern Conference. I think he's perfectly suited to be the number 2 guy for Jayson Tatum. But based on everything that sort of transpired in the offseason, and look, the guys that he's been rumored to be traded for are Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, and Anthony Davis. So, okay. Yeah. Guys that are like going to the Hall of going to the Hall of Fame. But I could see how that would rub you the same way, that now this is the 3rd time that it's come up. So I do wonder what happens if things do go south this year for the Celtics. Now, I still think they're going to win the most games in the Eastern Conference, but that Bucks situation and that Bucks team is going to be a totally different animal. So if it does end poorly for the Celtics, which obviously nobody hopes that happens, but the Jaylen dynamic is another reason to go all in now, secure the championship, try to get the championship, and then you're not worried about these things long term. It's like when Dwayne Wade won his first championship with the Heat early, and I understand at one point it got ugly, like after the Big 3 era, but you were like, okay, he's going to spend his career here. Same thing with Dirk. Even though they didn't win a championship, they're getting there. They're competing at a high level. You feel like, okay, he's not going to leave. I just want that to be a similar thing. I feel that way about Tatum, but I can't say that I have 100% certainty or close to it with Jaylen, just because of everything that's went down.
It's funny you bring that up. This is a whole other topic for another time, especially when he's not like nearing free agency. But I've sort of said what you've just said, except about Jayson Tatum in the past. Like, he just, I don't look at him, and I don't know why. I don't know what it is that I'm looking for him to say or do that would make me feel differently. I've just never felt during his ascension that he's a Celtics lifer. I would like him to be. He doesn't strike me as, I don't know, something. I would be more comfortable saying I could see Jaylen Brown sticking around long term than Jayson Tatum.
What could Tatum do for you to make you feel better? I'm just curious.
Not throw the ball out at the Cardinals game.
Can he call me? Can we talk through this? I don't know. I'm not saying it's based in like anything rational either. So this is like, what's that?
At least we know you're not being rational about this.
No, I mean, there's no like headline here, like, Kaufman, Tatum's leaving soon. Like, it's, it's nothing like, I don't know. I don't feel like it's not some sort of like some stupid, like, he's not a true Celtic or something. Like, it's nothing like that. I don't know. there's a little bit of hired gun in him. I think there's a little what's I don't know. I don't know. It's
what part of Jayson Tatum's personality that we complain we don't get to hear enough about makes you think he's a hired gun? Is it because we don't hear a lot about him?
I don't know. It's like it's sort of in the same way that I never thought Kevin Durant was going to stay in OKC forever. I didn't see him hopping from team to team to team to team and whatever, and who knows, where he goes next, but I don't believe he's going to retire a Brooklyn Net. I don't think any of us does. There's just something about Tatum that I could see negotiations with him getting really, regardless of how they go internally, getting really antsy for the public. People
it should be easy. You hand him a max contract. Here you go. Sign it. We're done here.
Okay.
They could pay him way more than anybody else.
They could do the same exact thing with Jaylen Brown 2 years from now. You think it's automatic Brown to take it? What if Brown, to Brian's point, or part of Brian's point, what if Brown says, maybe I could go be the number one somewhere else?
I don't think he'll take, because of the way people have talked about this, the way the TV money is structured, it doesn't behoove Jaylen Brown, and that's actually Tatum calling for you.
Jason,
well, you have
conference him in.
I think you have TV rights coming up to the point where it behooves Jaylen to finish this contract, then sign a 1-year contract for max, and then do the max deal.
I guess let me put it this way.
Because they can't offer him, this is where not signing the max the first time actually kills the Celtics, I think, right? Because they didn't offer him a full max the first time, they can't offer him a full max.
Well, that wasn't their fault. They offered him as much as, you're talking about Brown.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, they just couldn't sign him early. It makes no sense for Jaylen to sign that contract early.
No, for sure. Yeah, you wouldn't take it now if you're. I guess I'll put it this way, and Evan, by all means, I want to hear from you, but I'll ask Brian the question first. If, let's say, God forbid, I say this from a Celtics fan perspective, God forbid, over the next 2-3 years, Celtics, they just don't get it done. And I don't mean perennially in the finals don't get it done. I mean, there's a disappointing second round exit in there. They get to the conference finals 1 or 2 more times. Maybe they don't get back to the NBA finals. Injury or whatever else, whatever contributing factor holds them back. When Tatum is approaching free agency, you don't think there's any chance that he could look at it and say, well, I want to sign and trade. I want to go somewhere else. So I'll still make my max money, but I want to go somewhere where I have a better chance to win. It's just, for whatever reason, I've been in Boston for about a decade. It's not happening here. Or I'm willing to take a little bit less and 1 year less to go somewhere else. And on the back end, I'm just going to make up the money anyway. You don't think that's at all possible?
Well, I think if it is, then it's down the road, right? Because he just agreed to that max contract recently. So I think we're a ways away from getting to that point. But I understand the idea.
We're also talking about a guy who's 24.
Right. But if you look at it, this is what not irritates me, but looking back at the run last year that is sort of aggravating is just you never know when you're going to get back, right? Oklahoma City, and look, it's not like the Celtics traded the equivalent of Harden away, which was just an inexplicable move at the time, and it looks even worse now. But
I don't know. Max Strus is a good player.
Yeah, but Oklahoma City, they probably felt like they were going to keep getting back there, and they never did. So, I mean, that possibility could be there for the Celtics, but I still think based on rosters that they're going to get a lot of bites at the apple. And I think with Tatum, a lot of these other guys get unhappy. They feel like, okay, for example, LeBron, he felt like the organization was failing him with the team that they were putting around him. And the good thing about what Brad inherited, it feels like, okay, well, the infrastructure and the main pieces were there because of Danny. Tatum himself, Jaylen, Robert Williams, and Marcus Smart, sort of those core 4 players. And now what I really like about Brad taking over, which I'm sure Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum appreciate this more than really the fan base does, where Brad says, screw the picks. I mean, it's like Les Snead in the NFL with the Rams. I don't care about the picks, right? I'm getting rid of Kemba's contract. We have to do that. And Al was way better than anybody thought he was going to be. Same thing with Derek White. Remember, a lot of people in the national media crushed the Derek White trade because they said, oh, that's too much for Derek White, where it's like, okay, well, we just need more rotation pieces. We don't care about the 27th, 28th, whatever pick it ends up being in the draft. We need more rotation and pieces, and we need a deeper team. And then he does the same thing this offseason with Brogdon. So until the front office starts to fail Tatum or something dramatic happens with Jaylen Brown, I can't envision him wanting to leave because he's in one of the best situations in the NBA for a superstar to win a title. I mean, this team is incredibly deep.
Ev, I did come up with, while Brian was talking, I did come up with a rational reason, though. Okay, you ready? It's a very basic one. And it applies to anybody in the league as much as it applies to Jayson Tatum. It's 2022. How often does it happen anymore? How often do we see a guy spend his entire career, the vast majority of his entire career with a team?
Dirk and Tim Duncan, and that's really about it now. And I compare,
Pierce probably would have done it.
Well, yeah, but the opportunity was too good. But spent most of his career in Boston and is a monstrous figure in Boston, no question.
What about Deuce? What about if he's waiting for Deuce to play in the NBA like LeBron? Could that be it?
Yeah, but we don't know.
LeBron's almost already with
Bronny in LA.
Jeez,
Bronny's already looking ahead to seeing who's positioned to have a top whatever pick in that year.
Yeah,
he'll play with Bronny, and we've been saying on this show for years. I don't know why this is a story now. We've been saying for years these two are going to play together, and LeBron was going to wait this out. But it might not be a Laker.
They're going to do it in Vegas under John Henry's.
Oh no!
Ridiculous. Bill had it a while ago.
Playing in Seattle.
No, he's
Penguins, Liverpool. What else does he need? Worry about Rafael Devers.
Okay? Is what we need.
A little bit more on the Celtics here. For anyone that missed it, and I encourage go onto the CLNS YouTube page. Check out the interview if you haven't. It's only like 7 minutes long, something like that. Our own Bobby Manning, who is part of the Garden Report, has his own show as well. He theory, by the way. Another Syracuse guy worth mentioning, as with all the Carmelo talk. Bobby went last Saturday, so a handful of days ago, went to chat with Marcus Smart. I think he was the only one that went there to talk to Marcus Smart. Sort of, I don't know how that even happened, but he went and, exclusive one-on-one. It was a young game changer, his foundation. They had a pop-up shop selling some stuff. Just some of the highlights from that interview that I wrote down. Marcus is not quite 100% yet. He's feeling better than he was in, June, July, but he's not quite 100%. Players still have not spoken with each other all that much about the finals loss. They've just kind of dealt with it internally so far. And then when they get to camp, and they've started to shoot around together, but when camp opens and they really get going, Marcus thinks that's when they'll kind of have bare their souls with each other and then officially turn the page, but they're still not over this thing. He has not really chatted with Jaylen Brown all that much about the frantic summer. He's chatted with Brown plenty. Brown has a good head on his shoulders. He's walking around smiling, doesn't think the summer of trade rumors and all that is bothering him. In Smart's mind, he takes this from personal experience. He thinks being in trade rumors is a sign of respect, and he should appreciate it. He said if your name doesn't show up in trade rumors, it means nobody wants you. So Jaylen should actually be happy with the fact that he's been all these in all the Durant drama. The Gallinari injury, it's a bummer, but he hasn't really chatted with him. And Malcolm Brogdon, he's known him for years, and he's excited and can't wait to play with him. So those were the highlights. You can go back and listen if you just want to hear Marcus's personal take on these things. But hearing that or hearing the interview, I'm not sure which. In your case, Brian, was there any sort of big takeaway from Marcus's mild media availability?
Well, I do like how he spun the Jaylen Brown thing, right? Because it's like, well, I've been in a lot of these, so it's not that big of a deal. In fact, it's a compliment. I would like to be in the room when he talks to Jaylen about that, because look, maybe Jaylen is over it, but I have to imagine when it's like Jaylen's on a different level than Marcus Smart is in terms of where he's at in the NBA, so to speak. So I do wonder how he does feel about that. I do wonder what Brad said to him, if Brad actually did have because obviously what they're going to put out there through the media is that everything's good. And remember, Brad came out and said, basically, we never got too serious about the actual trade offer with Kevin Durant. So I do wonder if Brad had to sit down with Jaylen to sort of explain where everything's at right now. And to his point about Brogdon, I've always felt like the Brogdon thing, it's not as much competition with Smart as it is Brogdon and Derek White. Can't you guys see times when it's Derek White closing the game and not Brogdon? I can't see, and I know it happened in the postseason one time last year, but I can't see a scenario where Marcus Smart isn't in the closing lineup and Brogdon's in instead of Marcus. I just don't see that being a realistic scenario. So let's
also not presume full health for everybody.
Well, yeah, I think you want to add Brogdon. You want to add Brogdon's size to this whole thing. Like if you add Brogdon's size to everything, again, my point when I got absolutely roasted on Twitter for this, trying to explain to people that the big point guard thing is what makes Boston very good and makes them a difficult matchup for people. Brogdon just adds to that. He adds more size at that spot, but he can also guard up and guard down. So if you have two guys, I mean, the beauty of the Celtics is defensively, by adding Brogdon, they've somehow been the best. They're the best defensive team in the league last year, and they added to their defense with another good defensive backcourt player. Boston has, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't know how Perk picked the Lakers when his own team has significantly better defensive backcourt than the Lakers do right now. But like Boston legitimately has between Jaylen Brown, and Jaylen's a guy that's a wing / like guard, but Jaylen, Smart, Brogdon, and Derek White, good luck with all of that. Those guys are going to be a pain in the ass for a lot of people. I don't think, and I've never said this, like if you look up anybody that's watched Marcus Smart the last 7 years or however long he's been on the team at this point, I don't even know. He's always the guy you want on the floor at the end of games because the offense, it might drive you nuts, but he's going to do like 17 things on defense that are going to change the last 5 minutes of the game. So Brogdon, we haven't seen him have the ability to, if Brogdon starts doing that, then fine. But like we know that Smart can do that. Everybody on the staff is comfortable with Marcus doing that. I think entertaining the idea, as Brian put it, like he's not coming in to take Smart's minutes, he's coming in to take Derek White's minutes, and that's exactly correct, 100%.
Well, we're closing in on an hour here, which feels like an appropriate time to probably get out of here and start to look ahead to Thursday night football and plan our weekend betting for football on Sunday, or at least around my kids' soccer activities anyway. But any, I don't know, any prevailing Celtics takes on the way out the door from either of you?
No, the one other thing I'd say about the Smart situation is, like, one of their most successful plays last year was the Tatum Marcus Smart pick and roll, like without a traditional big involved. Like that's how Tatum got some of those easier isolations. So I'm hoping that they dig into that a little bit more heading into next season. And one thing I would like to see from Tatum is just, and look, the guy is already one of the 10 best players in the NBA. The one thing I'm wondering about, because I watched did you guys see the Drew Hanlon video where he's now working on a fake step back? I mean, and he's going into a floater, which is my thing that stuck out to me, because if you look at some of the elite scorers in the world, Luka and Kevin Durant, they're really good in that area. And it's not like Tatum's bad in that area, but Luka's over 5 attempts from that particular area in the court a game. And I do wonder if that's sort of the next step for Tatum, where we know he can hit the step back three. We know he can actually hit pull-up threes. He was much better from March on, and I believe those numbers will hold up, not to the extent they were, but pretty good. And he did a much better job getting to the basket in the second half of the season. I wonder if that next step for Tatum, because we saw the improvement from a playmaking perspective, but if that floater is next for Tatum, because so many elite guys in terms of scores, Devin Booker, who Tatum's a better player, but Booker's got a nice floater. I wonder if that's what he's working on this summer.
Once again, go ahead.
No, that'll open things up for Tatum too. It'll just be, his life will be a lot easier if he just adds that shot. You know, you won't have guys waiting for you at the rim, so to speak. They can't afford to back off you like that. So that's a huge shot for him.
It's Brian Barrett. He's been on the show before, but this is the first time that I've been able to join this, make it a 3-man party. Brian, appreciate it. And, congrats again, obviously, on the new gig over at the Ringer. I know that, between Bill Simmons and KOC and others, you got plenty of Celtics, centric voices over there. But if you're ever looking, for someone for Off the Pike and you're bored, you feel free. Evan and I are a DM away. We can hop on with you and chat all things Boston.
For sure, fellas. I appreciate it. And it was a lot of fun, man. I see we're so caught up in the Patriots season and the ineptitude of the Red Sox that it was nice to just talk some C's, man.
There you go. I focus on the one team in town that's poised to win a championship right now. As long as there's always at least one, and it's not, 0 for 4, which it hasn't been in many, many years. That's, we got that going for us. And in closing, folks, and thanks to all of you for listening, obviously. Let me just real quick, is this thing on? Signed, Carmelo Anthony. Okay, bye.